Hello, my friends, and welcome. I'm so glad you've decided to join me tonight. Before we begin, I want you to take a moment to settle in. Dim the lights, find your most comfortable chair, and leave the busyness of the world behind. While you're getting settled, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Your engagement truly helps, and the more you interact, the more these chilling tales will find their way back to your feed. Tonight, we're stepping into the shadows to share a few stories that are as true as they are unsettling. So, take a deep breath, get cozy, and let's explore the dark together. I need to tell you something about myself before I explain what happened that night. I am a professional skeptic. For 8 years, I worked as a psychiatric nurse at Memorial Hospital in Portland, Oregon. I have seen patients in the grip of psychosis, hallucinating entire worlds that do not exist. I have watched medications transform delusions into clarity. I understand that the human brain is capable of constructing elaborate fictions when under stress. I do not believe in ghosts. I do not believe in paranormal phenomena. What I experienced at Riverview Asylum should not have been possible. But it happened, and I need someone to know the truth before I lose the ability to distinguish between what is real and what my mind has created to protect itself from the memory. My name is Dr. Rebecca Marshall, and 3 months ago I joined a paranormal investigation team. Not because I believed in what they were doing, but because I wanted to debunk them. The team leader, a man named Gregory Holt, had been running a YouTube channel called Midnight Investigators for 5 years. He claimed to have documented genuine paranormal activity at dozens of locations across the United States. I had watched his videos with increasing frustration. Every EVP, every shadow, every battery drain could be explained by natural phenomena. Cold spots are caused by drafts. Electromagnetic field spikes occur near old wiring. Orbs in photographs are dust particles reflecting camera flash. I reached out to Gregory and told him I wanted to join his team for one investigation. I told him I would bring proper scientific equipment, controlled documentation, and a rational perspective. He agreed, perhaps hoping that having a medical professional would lend credibility to his work. Or perhaps he simply enjoyed the challenge. Either way, he invited me to Riverview Asylum. Riverview State Psychiatric Hospital opened in 1893 in the mountains of West Virginia. It was designed according to the Kirkbride Plan, a revolutionary approach that treated mental illness with fresh air, natural light, and therapeutic activities instead of chains and isolation. The main building was massive, 300 feet long, with 2 wings extending like arms from a central administration tower. At its peak, Riverview housed over 2,000 patients. But by the 1970s, the hospital had become overcrowded and underfunded. Reports of abuse emerged. Patients left in restraints for days. Experimental treatments without consent. A fire in 1981 killed 12 people in the East Wing. The hospital closed permanently in 1994. Since then, Riverview has sat empty, slowly crumbling, a monument to the suffering that occurred within its walls. Gregory's team consisted of 5 people, including myself. There was Marcus, the audio specialist who carried recording equipment sensitive enough to capture sounds below the threshold of human hearing. There was Jennifer, who operated the infrared cameras and thermal imaging devices. There was Kyle, a former electrician who monitored electromagnetic fields and battery levels. And there was Diane, who described herself as a sensitive, someone who could feel the presence of spirits. I had my own equipment, a medical-grade heart rate monitor, a device that measured stress hormones through skin conductance, and a portable EEG machine to track my own brain activity. If I experienced anything unusual, I wanted objective data to prove it was physiological, not paranormal. We arrived at Riverview just after sunset on a Friday in early November. The building loomed against the darkening sky, its Gothic towers silhouetted like broken teeth. Most of the windows were shattered. Graffiti covered the lower walls. The front entrance had been boarded up, but vandals had torn away enough planks to create an opening large enough to crawl through. Gregory led us inside with practiced ease. He had been here twice before, he said, and both times he had captured evidence of activity. The lobby was vast and empty, our footsteps echoing off walls covered in peeling paint. There were remnants of the hospital everywhere. Scattered patient files, their pages yellowed and brittle. A wheelchair rusted into immobility. On one wall, someone had spray-painted the words they never left in letters 3 feet tall. Diane stopped walking and placed her hand on the wall. She closed her eyes. "I'm sensing something," she said. "Residual energy. Strong emotions imprinted on this space." I said nothing, but I made a note in my journal. Time, 8:30 p.m. Subject reports sensing energy. No measurable environmental change detected. We split into 2 groups. Gregory, Marcus, and Kyle would investigate the east wing where the fire had occurred. Jennifer, Diane, and I would explore the administration building and medical wards. We planned to regroup in the lobby at midnight. I insisted we maintain radio contact every 15 minutes. Gregory agreed. I also suggested we synchronize our watches to ensure accurate timestamps for any evidence we collected. Everyone set their watches to 8:45 p.m. We separated, and I followed Jennifer and Diane down a long corridor lined with doors. Each door had a small window reinforced with wire mesh. Through them I could see patient rooms, some still containing metal bed frames bolted to the floor. The rooms were small, barely large enough for a bed and a chair. "Isolation cells," Diane whispered, "for patients who were considered dangerous." She paused at one door and pressed her face to the window. "I can feel them," she said. "So many people suffered here." I checked my equipment. My heart rate was elevated, 105 beats per minute. Normal for someone walking through a dark, unfamiliar building. No anomalies. At 9:15 p.m., we reached the medical ward. This section of the building had been used for treatment. There were examination rooms with rusted surgical tables, a pharmacy with shattered cabinets and broken glass covering the floor, and at the end of the hallway, a large room that Jennifer identified as the electroshock therapy chamber. She set up her infrared camera on a tripod and began recording. The room contained 4 stations, each with a bed and a machine that once delivered electrical current directly to the brain. Leather restraints hung from the bed frames. I knew the history of electroconvulsive therapy. In the 1940s and 50s, it was administered without anesthesia, without muscle relaxants. Patients experienced full-body convulsions that sometimes broke bones. They suffered memory loss, confusion, and lasting cognitive damage. If any place in this building held genuine trauma, it was this room. I sat on one of the beds and attached electrodes to my temples, activating my portable EEG. I wanted to monitor my brain activity in this environment, see if exposure to such a grim space would produce measurable changes in my neural pattern. That is when the batteries in Jennifer's camera died. She swore and pulled out fresh ones from her pack. She replaced them, but the camera would not turn on. She tried again. Nothing. I told her to try my equipment. She took my heart rate monitor and turned it on. The screen flickered once and went black. We both stared at it in silence. I checked my watch. 9:23 p.m. I checked Jennifer's watch. It also read 9:23 p.m. But when I looked at Diane's watch, it read 9:15 p.m. 8 minutes behind. I asked Diane if she had adjusted her watch. She insisted she had not. She had synchronized it with the rest of us at 8:45. I suggested her watch was malfunctioning. She shrugged and said, maybe it was the energy in this place affecting electronics. I made a note. Time discrepancy observed. Possible explanation: mechanical failure. We continued the investigation. At 9:30 p.m., I attempted to radio Gregory. No response. I tried again. Static. Jennifer tried her radio. Same result. We were now 3 floors deep into the building with no communication to the other team. I suggested we return to the lobby to regroup. Diane agreed. But as we walked back down the hallway, I noticed something disturbing. The doors we had passed earlier, the ones leading to isolation cells, were now open. All of them. I distinctly remembered them being closed. I asked Jennifer if she had opened any doors. She said no. Diane said she felt a presence moving through the hallway, opening doors as if searching for something. I told her that was ridiculous. Someone else must be in the building. Vandals or urban explorers. We needed to leave immediately. We reached the stairwell that would take us back to the lobby. But when we opened the door, we were not looking at stairs. We were looking at another hallway. The same hallway we had just walked down. The same open doors. The same patient rooms. I looked at my watch. 9:15 p.m. I looked at Jennifer's watch. 9:15 p.m. We had somehow lost 8 minutes. Or gained them. Or were caught in some kind of loop. I felt my heart rate spiking. 140 beats per minute. The EEG electrodes were still attached to my temples, recording everything. I forced myself to breathe slowly. There had to be a rational explanation. We had become disoriented in the dark. We had doubled back without realizing it. These old buildings are mazes. It is easy to lose your sense of direction. I told the others we needed to stay calm and retrace our steps carefully. We walked down the hallway again, counting our steps. 50 paces to the end. Turn left. Another 30 paces. The door to the stairwell should be on our right. I opened the door. Another hallway. Same as before. I checked my watch. 9:15 p.m. Jennifer started crying. She said we were trapped. She said the building would not let us leave. Diane grabbed my arm and pointed to one of the patient rooms. "There's someone in there," she whispered. I looked. In the dim light from our flashlights, I saw a figure sitting on the bed. A woman in a hospital gown, her hair long and tangled, her hands folded in her lap. She was rocking back and forth, humming a melody I did not recognize. I walked toward the room, my flashlight beam fixed on her. As I got closer, I realized she was not solid. I could see through her, see the wall behind her, see the texture of the bricks through her translucent form. But she was there. She was undeniably there. And when she looked up at me, her eyes were hollow, empty sockets that wept black tears down her cheeks. I stumbled backward. My heart rate monitor would have been screaming if it had power. The EEG was still recording. I could feel the electrodes against my skin. Whatever was happening, my brain was documenting it. The woman stood up from the bed and walked toward me. She did not walk the way living people walk. She glided, her feet not quite touching the ground. She opened her mouth, and a sound came out that was not a voice. It was static. It was the sound of old televisions tuned to dead channels. It was the sound of 1,000 voices speaking at once, layered and distorted and wrong. She reached out her hand and touched my face. Her fingers were cold. Not cold like winter. Cold like absence. Like the space between atoms. Like the void that exists before creation. And in that moment, I understood. Riverview Asylum was not haunted by the dead. It was haunted by time itself. The suffering that had occurred here had created a wound in reality. A place where moments did not pass linearly but folded back on themselves, trapping anyone who entered in an endless loop of the same terrible instant. I ripped the EEG electrodes from my temples and grabbed Jennifer and Diane. I told them to run. We ran down the hallway, not caring which direction we went, just trying to put distance between ourselves and that thing. We turned corners, climbed stairs, descended into basements. Every door we opened led to the same hallways. Every window we looked through showed the same view of the overgrown grounds. And every time I checked my watch, it read 9:15 p.m. We ran for what felt like hours. But it could have been minutes. Or seconds. Time had no meaning here. I started to understand what the patients must have felt. The ones locked in isolation cells. The ones strapped to tables and shocked until they could not remember their own names. They experienced time as an eternal present. A moment of suffering that never ended because there was no future to escape into. Riverview had absorbed that trauma. It had become a place where the past never finished happening. Eventually, we stopped running. We were in a room I did not recognize. It was circular, with walls covered in padded fabric. A seclusion room. For patients who hurt themselves. In the center of the room was a wooden chair. And sitting in the chair was Gregory. He looked up at us with blank eyes. "How long have you been here?" I asked. He did not answer. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I walked closer. There was dried blood on his shirt. His hands were covered in scratches, deep gouges that looked self-inflicted. I asked again, "Gregory, how long have you been here?" He finally spoke. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "I have been here for 3 days." I looked at my watch. Still 9:15 p.m. I asked him where Marcus and Kyle were. He said he did not know. They had split up to cover more ground. He had lost radio contact. He had tried to leave, but every door led back to the same rooms. He had tried to break windows, but the glass would not shatter. He had screamed for help, but no sound escaped the building. And then he had started to see them. The patients. Hundreds of them. Walking the hallways. Sitting in their rooms. Rocking. Humming. Staring with those hollow, empty eyes. I told Gregory we were leaving. All of us. Together. I did not care if we had to break through walls or climb out of windows. We were not staying in this place one more second. But when I turned to leave, the door was gone. The walls were smooth, unbroken, padded fabric. There was no exit. Jennifer started screaming. She clawed at the walls, tearing at the padding, pulling it away in strips. Underneath was concrete. Solid, impenetrable concrete. We were sealed in. Diane sat down on the floor and began to cry. She said she could feel them now. All of them. The patients. The ones who died here. The ones who lived here but stopped being alive in any way that mattered. She said their pain was still happening. It had never stopped. It would never stop. And now we were part of it. We had become another layer in the endless loop of suffering that Riverview contained. I do not know how long we were in that room. My watch never moved past 9:15 p.m., but I could feel time passing inside myself. I could feel my thoughts slowing down, my memories becoming confused. I could not remember what day it was. I could not remember how I had gotten here. I could only remember this moment, this room, these people, and I began to wonder if I had always been here. If Rebecca Marshall, the psychiatric nurse from Portland, was just a story I had invented to make myself feel like I existed somewhere else. Jennifer stopped screaming eventually. She curled up in a corner and hummed the same melody the woman in the hospital gown had hummed. Diane rocked back and forth, her eyes distant. Gregory did not move at all. He just sat in the chair, staring at nothing. His hands folded in his lap exactly like the woman I had seen earlier. I was the only one still fighting. I paced the room, measuring its dimensions, searching for weaknesses in the walls. And then I remembered the EEG. I had been wearing it when we entered this room. I checked my bag. The electrodes were there, coiled neatly. The recording device was still active. I plugged it into my laptop, which somehow had battery power even though nothing else did. I reviewed the data. What I saw made no sense. My brain activity from the moment I entered Riverview showed patterns I had never seen before. Theta waves, the kind associated with deep meditation or early sleep, overlapping with beta waves, the kind associated with active, anxious thought. But more than that, there were gaps. Moments where my brain activity simply stopped, flatlined. Not like sleep, not like unconsciousness, like non-existence, as if I had ceased to be for fractions of a second, over and over again. I looked at the timestamps on the recording. The EEG had been running for 47 hours. Not the 3 or 4 hours I thought I had been here. 47 hours. Almost 2 full days. And in that time, my brain had stopped functioning 73 times. 73 moments where I did not exist. Where I was caught between 1 second and the next, suspended in the space where time had broken down. I understood then what Riverview was doing to us. It was not trapping us in a loop. It was erasing us. Slowly. Moment by moment. Until there would be nothing left but the shell of a person, sitting in a chair, rocking back and forth, waiting for a future that would never arrive. I had one idea left. A desperate, irrational idea that went against everything I believed. But I was out of options. I took the EEG electrodes and attached them to Gregory's temples. I turned on the device and watched his brain activity. Flatline. No theta waves. No beta waves. Nothing. Gregory was functionally brain dead. But he was still moving. Still breathing. Still existing in some horrible in-between state. I did the same with Jennifer and Diane. Same results. They were gone. Not dead, but not alive in any meaningful sense. I was the only one left. The only one whose brain was still fighting to maintain continuity. And I knew it was only a matter of time before I joined them. I made a decision. I sat down in the center of the room and removed the EEG. I took out my journal and wrote this account. Every detail I could remember. I do not know if anyone will ever find it. I do not know if this building will ever release us. But I need to document what happened here. I need to create a record that proves we existed outside of this moment. That we were real people with real lives before Riverview trapped us in its broken timeline. The walls are starting to fade now. I can see through them, see other rooms, other hallways, other versions of this building layered on top of each other like transparencies. I can see patients from different decades, all existing in the same space. Their suffering compressed into a single eternal instant. I can see myself sitting in this room yesterday, and tomorrow, and 10 years from now, all at once. Time has collapsed entirely. If you are reading this, do not go to Riverview Asylum. Do not try to investigate it. Do not try to understand it. Some places are not meant to be explored. Some suffering is so profound that it warps the fabric of reality itself, creating pockets where the normal rules do not apply. Riverview is one of those places. It is a wound that will never heal, and anyone who enters becomes part of the scar tissue. I am writing this at 9:15 p.m. I have been writing it for 3 months. I will be writing it forever. Because in Riverview, there is no after. There is only during, and during never ends. Dr. Rebecca Marshall, Memorial Hospital, Portland, Oregon. If you know me, if you remember me, please do not forget that I existed before this. Please remember that I was real. This story is real horror, the kind that happens every day in America. It's about slow poisoning, corporate greed, government failure, and parents watching their children die while being powerless to stop it. The monster isn't supernatural. It's benzene in the soil, chemicals in the water, and a system that values profit over human life. I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened to my daughter. I am a rational person. I have a master's degree in environmental science. I worked for the Environmental Protection Agency for 12 years before I took early retirement. I know about soil contamination, groundwater pollution, and corporate negligence. I have read every toxicology report published on industrial chemical exposure. I thought I could protect my family. I thought if I did my research, if I chose the right neighborhood, if I tested the water myself, we would be safe. I was wrong. And now my daughter is dying, and there is nothing I can do to save her. This is the story of Clearwater Meadows and the poison that lives beneath its perfect lawns. My name is Dr. Caroline Hayes, and 3 years ago my husband Dev and I moved to Clearwater Meadows, a new planned community in upstate New York, about 30 miles west of Buffalo. It was everything we had been looking for. Wide streets lined with young maple trees. Colonial-style homes with 2-car garages and wraparound porches. A community center with a pool and tennis courts. The development had been built on former farmland, which the brochures called a return to nature, a chance to raise children in fresh air and open spaces. The price was reasonable, almost suspiciously so, but the real estate agent explained that the developer wanted to attract young families, professionals who would invest in the community long term. We signed the papers in June of 2021. We moved in that August with our 7-year-old daughter Emma. Emma was a bright, healthy child. She loved to play outside, to run barefoot through the grass, to dig in the garden we planted in our backyard. She would come inside with dirt under her fingernails and leaves in her hair, laughing about the earthworms she had found, the flowers that were starting to bloom. Dev and I would watch her from the kitchen window and feel grateful. We had escaped the noise and pollution of the city. We had given our daughter a childhood surrounded by green, growing things. Everything seemed perfect. For 6 months, everything was perfect. And then, Emma got sick. It started small. She complained that her stomach hurt. She said the food tasted funny, even her favorite meals. She stopped eating as much, started losing weight. We took her to the pediatrician, who ran tests for allergies, for celiac disease, for parasites. Everything came back negative. The doctor said it was probably stress from starting at a new school, that children sometimes develop psychosomatic symptoms when adjusting to change. We should give it time. So, we waited, and Emma got worse. She started having nosebleeds, sudden and heavy, blood soaking through tissues and dripping onto her clothes. Her hair began to fall out in clumps. I would find it on her pillow in the morning, long blonde strands tangled together like spider webs. Her skin developed rashes, angry red patches that appeared overnight and refused to heal. We took her back to the doctor. He referred us to a specialist. The specialist ran more tests. Blood work, biopsies, scans, and that is when they found it. Emma had developed a rare form of leukemia, acute myeloid leukemia, aggressive and fast-moving. The oncologist said it was unusual to see this type of cancer in a child so young, but it happened sometimes. There was no way to know what caused it. We started chemotherapy immediately. While Emma was in the hospital receiving her first round of treatment, I did what any parent would do. I researched. I read medical journals and case studies. I looked for environmental factors that could contribute to childhood leukemia, and I found something that made my blood run cold. Benzene exposure. Benzene is a known carcinogen, a chemical found in petroleum products, industrial solvents, and pesticides. Long-term exposure, even at low levels, can cause leukemia, especially in children. I remembered my training at the EPA. I remembered the protocols for testing residential areas for contamination. I called a private environmental testing company and paid them to come to our house. They took samples of our soil, our water, and the air inside our home. The results came back 2 weeks later. The benzene levels in our soil were 40 times higher than what the EPA considers safe. The groundwater beneath our property contained trichloroethylene, a toxic solvent used in manufacturing, at concentrations that should have triggered an immediate evacuation. Our home, the place where we had raised our daughter, where she had played and slept and breathed, was poisoned. I contacted the developer of Clearwater Meadows, a company called Greenfield Estates. I demanded to know what had been on this land before it was turned into a subdivision. The representative I spoke with was polite, but vague. He said the land had been farmland, nothing more. I pressed him. I told him about the test results, about Emma's leukemia. He said he was very sorry to hear about my daughter's illness, but there was no evidence linking her condition to the property. I should consult with my doctors. I hung up and called the county clerk's office. I requested historical records for the land parcel where Clearwater Meadows now stood. What I found was worse than I had imagined. From 1946 to 1982, the land had been the site of a chemical manufacturing plant. The plant had produced pesticides, solvents, and industrial cleaners. In 1973, there had been a documented spill. Thousands of gallons of chemical waste released into the ground. The plant had been fined, but the cleanup was minimal. They covered the contaminated soil with clay and moved on. In 1982, the plant closed. The building was demolished. And in 2019, Greenfield Estates purchased the land for development. They did not test for contamination. They did not disclose the site's history to buyers. They simply paved over the poison and built houses on top of it. I went to the Clearwater Meadows Community Center and posted a notice on the bulletin board. I asked if any other families had experienced unexplained illnesses. Within 2 days, I received 17 phone calls. One mother said her infant son had been diagnosed with a severe respiratory condition. Another family reported that their daughter had developed kidney failure at age 9. A man in his 30s told me he had been healthy when he moved in, but now he had chronic migraines and his vision was deteriorating. A woman said her husband had developed liver cancer 6 months after they bought their home. Every single family lived in our section of the development, the original phase built directly over the former chemical plant. I organized a meeting. 23 families showed up, parents with dark circles under their eyes, holding medical files thick with test results and diagnoses. We shared our stories. We compared symptoms, and we realized we were not isolated cases. We were a cluster, a cancer cluster. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in environmental litigation. He reviewed the evidence, the historical records, the test results, the medical reports. He said we had a strong case. Greenfield Estates had failed to perform due diligence. They had knowingly built on contaminated land and sold homes to families without disclosure. We filed a class action lawsuit. The company responded with a team of corporate attorneys who argued that there was no proof the contamination caused our illnesses. Cancer occurs naturally, they said. Childhood leukemia has many potential causes. The soil contamination might be unrelated. They dragged the case through the courts for months, filing motion after motion, burying us in paperwork, waiting for us to give up. But we did not give up, because our children were still getting sick. Emma lost all her hair from the chemotherapy. She vomited constantly, her small body racked with pain. She asked me why this was happening to her, what she had done wrong. I told her she had done nothing wrong, that sometimes bad things happen to good people, that we were fighting to make it better. But I knew the truth. I had brought her to this place. I had chosen this house, this neighborhood, this perfect green lawn soaked in poison. I had failed to protect her, and now I was watching her die. Other children in the neighborhood were showing symptoms. A 5-year-old boy developed brain tumors. Twin girls, both 8 years old, were diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma within weeks of each other. A teenage girl lost her ability to walk, her nervous system destroyed by chemical exposure. The pediatric oncology wing at Buffalo General Hospital had 7 children from Clearwater, Meadows, all receiving treatment at the same time. 7 children from a development of less than 200 homes. The oncologist noticed. They contacted the county health department. An investigation was launched. The state sent inspectors to test the soil and groundwater across the entire development. The results were even worse than my private tests had shown. The contamination was not limited to our section. It had spread through underground aquifers, carried by rainwater and runoff, seeping into every yard, every garden, every foundation. The entire development was built on a toxic waste site, and no one had told us. The state issued an emergency declaration. Clearwater Meadows was classified as a Superfund site, one of the most contaminated residential areas in New York. Families were advised to evacuate immediately. But where were we supposed to go? We had invested everything we had into these homes. Our mortgages were underwater, the properties worthless now that everyone knew about the contamination. The bank would not refinance. The developer refused to buy back the homes. We were trapped, living on poisoned ground, breathing poisoned air, drinking water that tasted like metal and chemicals. Some families left anyway, abandoning their houses and their debts, choosing homelessness over staying in a place that was killing them. Others stayed because they had no choice. They boarded up their windows and tried to seal out the poison, as if walls and duct tape could protect them from what was already inside their bodies. The lawsuit dragged on. Greenfield Estates declared bankruptcy, claiming they did not have the funds to compensate the victims. The original chemical company that had operated the plant was long defunct, dissolved decades ago, its owners dead or disappeared. There was no one left to hold accountable, no one to pay for the cleanup, no one to help the families whose children were dying. The state promised to remediate the site, to excavate the contaminated soil and treat the groundwater, but the process would take years, decades maybe. And in the meantime, we were on our own. Emma went into remission after 9 months of chemotherapy. The doctors called it a miracle, but I knew better. Remission is not a cure. The cancer could come back at any time, especially if she continued to be exposed to the same toxins that caused it in the first place. I packed up our belongings. We left Clearwater Meadows in the middle of the night, driving away from the house that had nearly killed our daughter. We moved into a rented apartment in Buffalo, a small 2-bedroom unit on the 4th floor of an old building. There was no yard for Emma to play in, no garden to tend. But the water was clean. The air did not smell like chemicals. And for the first time in over a year, Emma started to gain weight again. Her hair grew back, thin and patchy at first, then thicker. The rashes on her skin began to fade. She smiled more. She laughed. She asked if she could go back to playing outside. I said yes, but only in the park, on concrete and asphalt, far away from any dirt that might be hiding poison. 6 months after we left Clearwater Meadows, I received a call from one of the mothers who had stayed behind. Her name was Jennifer, and her daughter had been in Emma's class at school. Jennifer was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She told me that her daughter had died. She was 10 years old. The cancer had spread to her brain, her lungs, her liver. The doctors had tried everything, but it was too aggressive, too fast. Jennifer said the funeral was on Saturday. She asked if we would come. I told her we would. And then I asked her why she had stayed, why she had not left when the evacuation order was issued. She said she had nowhere else to go. She said they owed $200,000 on a house that was worth nothing. She said her husband had lost his job because he had taken too much time off to care for their daughter. She said they were living on credit cards and hope, waiting for a settlement that would never come. She said she was sorry. Sorry for staying. Sorry for believing the lies. Sorry for trusting that someone would save them. I attended Jennifer's daughter's funeral. There were 15 people there, mostly neighbors from Clearwater Meadows, all of them thin and pale, all of them with the same haunted look in their eyes. The casket was small, white with pink roses. The pastor spoke about God's plan and eternal rest. But I could not listen. I kept thinking about the chemical plant, about the men who had spilled poison into the ground and covered it up. I kept thinking about the developers who had built houses on top of a toxic waste site and sold them to families with children. I kept thinking about the government officials who had known about the contamination and done nothing. All of them had made choices. All of them had prioritized profit over people. And now a little girl was dead. And there would be more. Many more. Clearwater Meadows is still there. Some families remain, living in homes they cannot sell, trying to survive on poisoned land. The state has begun remediation, digging up contaminated soil and hauling it away in trucks. But the work is slow and incomplete. The groundwater is still toxic. The air still carries traces of benzene and trichloroethylene. Children still play in yards where chemicals have seeped into every blade of grass, every flower, every living thing. And they will get sick. Some of them are already sick. And their parents will fight, as I fought, against companies and governments and systems that do not care whether they live or die. Because in the end, we are expendable. Our homes, our health, our children, all of it is worth less than the cost of a proper cleanup. Less than the cost of telling the truth. Emma is 13 now. She has been in remission for 2 years. The doctors say she is doing well, that her blood work looks good, that we caught it early enough. But I see the fear in their eyes when they examine her. I see them taking extra notes, running extra tests, checking for signs that the cancer has returned. Because they know, as I know, that children who survive leukemia often face a lifetime of health problems. Secondary cancers, organ damage, immune system disorders. Emma will never be free of what Clearwater Meadows did to her. She will carry the poison in her cells for the rest of her life. And I will carry the guilt. The knowledge that I brought her to that place. That I failed to protect her. If you are reading this, if you are considering buying a home in a new development, please do your research. Do more than I did. Demand environmental testing. Request historical records for the land. Ask what was there before the houses were built. Because developers lie. Corporations lie. Governments lie. And by the time you discover the truth, it may be too late. Your child may already be sick. Your body may already be breaking down. You may already be living on poisoned ground, breathing poisoned air, drinking poisoned water. And there will be no one to help you. No one to compensate you for what you have lost. No one to hold accountable for the crime of building homes on top of a chemical graveyard. Clearwater Meadows is not the only place like this. There are thousands of contaminated sites across the United States. Many of them hidden beneath subdivisions and schools and parks. Love Canal in New York. Times Beach in Missouri. Pitcher in Oklahoma. Each one a monument to corporate greed and government negligence. Each one filled with families who trusted the wrong people, who believed the lies, who paid the price with their health and their lives. And there will be more. There are always more. Because as long as cleaning up toxic waste costs more than covering it up, companies will choose the cheaper option. They will bury the poison and build on top of it. They will sell homes to unsuspecting families. And when people get sick, when children die, they will deny responsibility. They will claim ignorance. They will hire lawyers and delay justice until the victims give up or die. And the cycle will continue. I am writing this from our apartment in Buffalo. Emma is in her room doing homework, listening to music, living a normal teenage life. But I know it is temporary. I know the cancer may come back. I know the chemicals in her body are still there, dormant but not gone, waiting for the right conditions to activate again. I know that every day she lives is a gift, and every day I wonder if it will be her last. This is what Clearwater Meadows took from me. Not just my savings, not just my home. It took my peace of mind. It took my faith in the systems that are supposed to protect us. It took my ability to believe that if I do everything right, if I follow all the rules, my child will be safe. Because the truth is, she is not safe. None of us are safe. As long as profit matters more than people, as long as corporations can poison the ground and walk away unpunished, we are all living in Clearwater Meadows. We are all drinking the poison. We are all waiting to get sick. And when we do, we will be alone. Just like Jennifer. Just like all the other mothers and fathers and children who trusted the wrong people and paid the ultimate price. If you want to help, demand accountability. Support legislation that requires environmental testing before residential development.
Vote for representatives who prioritize public health over corporate profits.
Donate to organizations that provide legal aid to families affected by toxic contamination. Speak up when you see injustice. Do not let them bury the truth. Do not let them forget. Because silence is complicity, and we cannot afford to be silent anymore. Emma is alive today because we left. Because I had the resources and the knowledge to understand what was happening, and the means to escape. But not everyone has that privilege. Not everyone can walk away from a poisoned home. Not everyone can afford private environmental testing or lawyers or medical care. They stay. They suffer. They die. And the world moves on, forgetting their names, erasing their stories, pretending it never happened. I will not forget. I will not let Emma's story be erased. I will tell anyone who will listen what Clearwater Meadows did to my daughter, to all the children who live there, to the families who are still trapped in that poisoned place. And maybe, if enough people hear the truth, something will change. Maybe the next family will be spared. Maybe the next child will live. Maybe we will finally learn that some things are more important than money. Maybe. But I am not holding my breath. Remember this. Loneliness is a poison. It eats away at people slowly, turning pain into rage, love into obsession, sadness into something far darker. When we abandon those who love us, when we take devotion for granted, when we leave people alone with nothing but their pain and their memories, we create monsters. And sometimes, those monsters serve us the consequences of our neglect. Comment below if you agree with me. Thank you now. Get started. Stay present. Stay grateful. Stay connected. I don't like anyone anymore. I don't trust anyone. And after what happened on that highway 3 months ago, I can't sleep without checking every lock twice. My name is Detective Marcus Cole. 22 years on the force. I've seen murders, suicides, accidents that would make your stomach turn. But nothing. Nothing prepared me for what I found at that roadside food stall. Some nights I still wake up screaming, still taste that food, still see her smile, and I know I'll never be the same again. It started on a Wednesday night in October. I'd been investigating a complaint in a small township about 60 miles outside the metro area. Some lovesick girl crying about her boyfriend who never showed up for their meeting. Typical waste of time. But that's the job. By the time I finished taking her statement, it was past 11 p.m. The roads were empty. No street lights. Just my headlights cutting through the darkness and the occasional reflector on the side of the road. I should have driven straight back to the city. Should have pushed through the exhaustion. But I was hungry. Starving, actually. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. That's when I saw it. A small food stall lit up against the darkness. Warm lights spilling out onto the empty highway. The smell of food cooking. Rich and savory, making my mouth water. I pulled over, the engine ticking as it cooled. The place looked clean enough. Small. Just a single building with a few tables outside and a kitchen area in the back. And standing in the doorway, a woman. She was beautiful in that simple, unadorned way. Maybe 30 years old. Traditional clothes. Long dark hair. But it was her eyes that struck me. Sad eyes. The kind that have seen too much disappointment. "Hello," she said, her voice soft. "Sorry to trouble you so late at night." "No trouble," I said, showing her my badge. "I'm Detective Cole. I was just passing through and saw your food stall. Can I get something to eat?" She smiled, but it didn't reach those sad eyes. "Of course. Please, sit. What would you like?" I looked at the small menu board. "What's your specialty?" "The beef stew is very good," she said. "My husband's recipe." "Your husband runs this place?" "Yes. He's gone to the city for some work. I'm managing alone tonight." She paused. "My name is Sarah." Something about the way she said her name. It felt important, like she was testing whether I'd remember it. "Sarah?" I repeated. "Beautiful name." Her smile widened just a fraction. "I'll make you the stew. It won't take long." She disappeared into the kitchen, and I sat at one of the outdoor tables. The night was quiet. Too quiet. No traffic. No animal sounds. Just the distant hiss of the gas stove from the kitchen. I pulled out my phone to check messages. No signal. Not unusual this far from the city. That's when I noticed something odd. The food stall had no other customers. No vehicles parked outside except mine. For a place on a major highway, that seemed strange. Sarah returned 20 minutes later with a steaming pot. The smell hit me first. Incredible. Rich gravy with chunks of meat that fell apart at a touch. Fresh bread on the side, still warm from the kitchen oven. "This looks amazing," I said, and meant it. "You must get a lot of customers." She sat down across from me, which struck me as odd. "Not as many as we used to," she said quietly. "People don't stop like they used to. Everyone's in such a hurry now." I took a bite. The meat was incredible. Tender. Perfectly spiced. Better than anything I'd had in years. "Your husband is a lucky man," I said without thinking. "If my wife cooked like this, I'd never leave home." Her expression changed. Something flickered across her face. "Your wife doesn't cook?" She does." I stammered, suddenly uncomfortable. "I just meant, this is really good." "You're not happy with her?" It wasn't a question. Somehow she knew. I should have lied. Should have changed the subject. But I was tired. Alone. And there was something about Sarah's sad eyes that made me want to be honest. "We're struggling," I admitted. "I work too much. She says I'm never home, that I care more about my job than her." Sarah nodded slowly. "My husband is the same, always going to the city, always working, always leaving me alone." "How often does he go?" "Every other day," she said, and there was bitterness in her voice now. What kind of man leaves his wife alone every other day? What kind of man chooses work over? She trailed off, but I understood what she meant. I ate in silence for a while. The food was so good I couldn't stop, even though something in my gut was telling me to leave, to get back in my car and drive away. But I was so tired, and the food kept coming. More bread, more stew, a sweet dessert I didn't remember ordering. "It's getting late," Sarah said softly. and it's not safe to drive now. There's been an accident further down the road. Police have blocked it off. I frowned. I didn't hear about any accident. It just happened. A truck overturned. They're clearing it now, but it'll take hours. She smiled that sad smile again. If you want, you can stay here tonight. We have a small hut next to the food stall. You'd be safe. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to refuse. To get in my car and drive, accident or no accident. But I was so full, so tired. And something about Sarah's voice was soothing. Hypnotic, almost. Just for a few hours I heard myself say, "I'll leave at dawn." Her smile widened. Of course, just a few hours. She showed me to the hut. It was simple. A bed, a small table, a kerosene lamp casting flickering shadows on the walls. "Sleep well, detective," she said from the doorway. "Breakfast will be ready when you wake." I should have asked more questions. Should have wondered why she had a guest hut ready. Why she seemed so prepared for someone to stay. Instead, I collapsed onto the bed. My eyelids felt heavy. My limbs felt like lead. I was asleep in seconds. The dream started immediately. I was still in the hut, but it was different. Darker. The walls were covered in photos. Dozens of them. Hundreds of them. All men. All wearing police uniforms. All with the same expression, terror frozen on their faces. In the dream, I tried to leave, but the door was locked. The windows were barred, and Sarah was standing in the corner, watching me with those sad eyes. "You're just like him," she whispered. "Just like my David." "Who's David?" I asked, but my voice came out wrong, distorted. "My husband," she said, moving closer. "He left me, just like you leave your wife. Just like all men leave. Always choosing something else. Someone else. Never staying. Never being enough." She was inches from me now. I could smell something wrong on her breath. Sweet. Metallic. "I cooked him for you," she said, still smiling. "Did you like my David?" I tried to scream. Tried to run. But my body wouldn't move. "You ate him," she continued, her voice still soft. Still sad. "Every bite. You said it was the best meal you'd ever had. That my husband was lucky. That I had magic in my hands." The room began to spin. The photos on the walls came alive. All those frozen faces screaming silently. "Now you'll stay," Sarah said. "You'll never leave me. None of you ever leave me." I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. Dawnlight was creeping through the window. Just a dream. Just a nightmare from eating too much before bed. But my hands were tied. Thick rope binding my wrists to the bed frame. My ankles too. I couldn't move. Sarah stood in the doorway, backlit by the morning sun. She looked different now. Her hair was loose. Her eyes were wide. Too wide. "You're awake," she said, her voice perfectly calm. "Good. We need to talk before breakfast." "What the hell is this?" I demanded, pulling at the ropes. "I'm a police officer. You can't..." "Can't what?" She moved into the room. "You came here willingly, ate my food, slept in my bed, just like all the others." "Others?" She gestured to the walls. In the daylight I could see them clearly now. Photos. Newspaper clippings. Missing person reports. All men. All police officers. All disappeared on the same highway over the past 5 years. "My David left me for another woman," Sarah said, still in that eerily calm voice. "After 10 years of marriage, he told me he never loved me. That I was boring. That I was too needy. Too emotional." She ran her fingers along the wall, touching each photo gently. "So I cooked him. ground his bones into the spices, mixed his flesh into the stew, and I served him to the next man who stopped here. A police officer, just like you. Someone who would appreciate a home-cooked meal. Someone who was also running away from his wife. My stomach turned. The food from last night? No. No, no, no. You're insane, I whispered. Am I? She tilted her head. Or am I just tired of being abandoned? Tired of being unloved? Tired of watching men choose everything and everyone except the women who love them? She moved closer, and I could see something in her hand. A knife. The blade catching the morning light. You're just like my David, she said softly. The same anger in your eyes. The same lust when you looked at me last night. The same way you spoke about your wife. Like she was an obligation. A burden. I never... You did, she interrupted. You all do. You take and take and take, and you give nothing back. So now I take something from you. I don't remember what happened next. The doctors say I was in shock. Traumatic amnesia. All I know is that I woke up in a hospital 3 days later. They found me on the side of the highway, half a mile from where my car was parked. No injuries. No signs of violence. But I was clutching a note. Written in elegant handwriting. Thank you for the company, detective. My David has company now. He's not lonely anymore. Neither am I. They sent officers to investigate the food stall. Found nothing. No building. No structure. Just an empty lot with tire tracks and the remains of a fire pit. But they found bones in the ash. Dozens of bones. Human bones. DNA matched 7 missing officers from the past 5 years. They never found the 8th body. They never found David. I'm writing this 3 months later. I've been on medical leave. They say I'm recovering from a nervous breakdown. But I know the truth. I can still taste that stew. Still see Sarah's sad eyes. Still hear her voice asking if I liked the food. And some nights I wake up to the smell of cooking. Rich and savory. Making my mouth water despite the horror. Because part of me, some dark, terrible part of me, still thinks it was the best meal I'd ever had. I don't like anyone anymore. I don't trust anyone. I've given up on relationships. I'm tired of it all. But sometimes, late at night, I think about Sarah's question. About the men who leave, who abandon, who take love for granted until it's too late. And I wonder, was she the monster? Or was it us all along? Because you never know what someone who's been left alone too long might cook up while waiting for you to come home. I have a degree in psychology. I work as a therapist, and for years I treated people who claimed to see things that were not there. I always approached these cases with compassion, but also with science. Trauma can do strange things to the mind. Memory is unreliable. The brain fills in gaps with fiction. That is what I believed. That is what I told myself, even 10 years ago when my brother disappeared. But now I know better. Now I know that some places hold on to pain like a wound that never heals, and some souls never find peace. This is the story of how I learned that truth, and how I finally freed my brother from the house that kept him prisoner for a decade. My name is Monica Mitchell, and 10 years ago, my older brother Daniel vanished without a trace. We were on a family trip to Sherwood County, Pennsylvania, a rural area known for its forests and old estates. My parents had rented a beautiful vacation home, the kind of place that looks perfect in photographs, but feels wrong the moment you step inside. Daniel was 16. I was 13. He was my protector, my best friend, the person who always made me feel safe. On our 3rd night there, we decided to explore the woods behind the property. There was an abandoned house deep in the trees, maybe half a mile from where we were staying. Local kids had dared us to check it out. They said it used to be a private school, back in the early 1900s. They said a teacher had lived there with her students. They said she never let them leave. We should have listened to the fear in their voices. We should have stayed away. But Daniel was brave, and I wanted to be brave like him. So, we went. I remember the house was massive, 3 stories tall with broken windows that looked like empty eye sockets. The front door hung open, invitation and warning at the same time. Daniel held my hand as we stepped inside. The floor was covered in dust and debris. There were old desks scattered throughout the rooms, some overturned, some still standing in neat rows as if waiting for students who would never return. On the walls, we saw children's drawings, faded and peeling but still visible. Stick figures holding hands. A house with smoke rising from the chimney. Words scrawled in childish handwriting. I want to go home, and please let us leave. And she is watching. Daniel tried to make a joke about it, tried to make me laugh, but his voice shook. We both felt it, that thickness in the air, like the house itself was breathing around us. Then we heard the singing. A woman's voice, thin and cracked, coming from somewhere above us. She was singing a lullaby, the kind you sing to put children to sleep. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Daniel told me to run. He told me to get out and not look back. But I froze. I could not move. And then I saw her. She appeared at the top of the staircase, a figure in a long black dress, her face pale and twisted with rage. Her eyes were holes, empty and dark. She pointed at us, and her mouth opened in a scream that was not a sound, but a feeling, a wave of pure hatred that hit me like a physical force. I stumbled backward. Daniel pushed me toward the door. He shouted at me to go, to run, to save myself. And I did. I ran. I left him there. I left my brother in that house. And when I looked back from the edge of the woods, I saw the door slam shut. I heard him screaming my name. I heard him pounding on the door from the inside. But when I tried to go back, my legs would not move. It was like something invisible was holding me in place, forcing me to watch. Then the screaming stopped. The house went silent, and Daniel was gone. The police searched for weeks. They brought in dogs, helicopters, search teams. They combed through the woods and dragged the nearby river. They questioned me over and over, asking me what happened, where he went, if he ran away. But how could I tell them the truth? How could I say that a ghost took him, that a house swallowed him whole? They thought I was traumatized, confused, blocking out the real memory. My parents thought I was protecting someone, that maybe Daniel had been hurt by a stranger, and I was too scared to say. But I knew. I knew he was in that house. I knew she had him. For 10 years I tried to forget. I went to therapy. I finished school. I built a new life. But Daniel never left me. Sometimes late at night I would hear his voice calling my name. Sometimes I would see his face in my dreams, pale and thin, begging me to come back for him. And then, 2 months ago, I met my husband, Michael. He was kind and patient and understanding when I told him about my brother. He held me when I cried. And when I finally confessed that I wanted to go back, that I needed to know what happened, he did not hesitate. He said he would go with me. He said we would face it together. We drove back to Sherwood County on a cold October afternoon. The vacation home my parents had rented was long gone, sold and torn down years ago. But the house in the woods was still there. We parked on the side of a dirt road and walked through the trees. With every step, I felt the weight of that place pressing down on me, like walking into deep water. Michael held my hand. He told me I was not alone. But when we reached the clearing and saw the house, he stopped. He felt it too. That wrongness. That sense that we were not supposed to be there. The front door was closed this time. I pushed it open, and the hinges screamed. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered. The desks, the drawings, the dust. It was like the house had been waiting for me. Like it knew I would come back. We searched the first floor, then the second. Room after room of decay and shadows. And then, in what must have been the teacher's study, we found her diary. The pages were yellow and brittle, but the handwriting was clear. Her name was Margaret Thornton.
She had been a school teacher in 1908.
A woman who dedicated her life to educating children in this remote part of Pennsylvania. She wrote about her students with love and pride. She wrote about teaching them to read, to write, to be good and obedient. But then the entries changed. She wrote about parents taking their children away, about losing her position, about being abandoned and forgotten. She wrote about rage, about betrayal, about the unfairness of a world that did not appreciate her sacrifices. And in her final entry, dated November 3rd, 1912, she wrote, "They will never leave me again. I will keep them here forever. They will stay with me and be mine, and no one will take them away." Michael read the entry out loud, and his voice cracked on the last word. That is when we heard the children. Footsteps running on the floor above us. Laughter high and thin, echoing through the walls. And then, cutting through it all, a single voice I would have known anywhere. "Monica!" It was Daniel. He was calling for me. I ran up the stairs, Michael shouting behind me. On the third floor, I found a door I had not seen before. A heavy wooden door with iron hinges. I pulled it open. Beyond it was a long hallway, longer than the house should have been, lined with doors on either side. And at the far end, standing in shadow, was Daniel. Or what was left of him. He looked exactly as he had 10 years ago, 16 years old, wearing the same clothes he had worn that night. But his skin was gray, his eyes were hollow, and when he spoke his voice was wrong, layered with echoes. "Monica, you came back. He has been waiting for me. Waiting to take me too. She keeps us here," he said. "She will not let us go. We are hers." I begged him to come with me, to leave, to fight. But he shook his head. "She is too strong," he said. "She feeds on our fear, on our pain. She keeps us trapped, keeps our souls here, making us children again so she can teach us and love us, and never be alone. The only way to free us is to destroy what binds her to this place." I asked him what that meant. He pointed to the room behind him. "In there," he said, "you will find what you need. But you have to be fast. She knows you are here. She is coming." Michael and I ran past Daniel, into the room he had indicated. It was a small, windowless space, and in the center there was a pile of bones. Small bones, child-sized, arranged in a circle around a large iron box. Inside the box we found more remains, wrapped in cloth that had long since rotted away. These were the students, the ones who had died here. Margaret Thornton had not been a ghost when she killed them. She had been flesh and blood, a woman driven mad by loneliness and obsession. And when she died, she stayed, feeding on the souls of anyone who entered her house, keeping them prisoner just as she had kept those children. Michael pulled out his lighter. "We need to burn it," he said. "We need to burn everything. The remains, the house, all of it. It is the only way." That is when she appeared. Margaret Thornton, the woman I had seen 10 years ago. Except now she was fully formed. Solid, real. Her face was twisted with fury, her hands curled into claws. "You will not take them from me," she hissed. "They are mine. They belong to me." She lunged at Michael, and he stumbled backward, dropping the lighter. I grabbed it, flicked it open, and held the flame to the cloth wrapped around the bones. It caught immediately, the fire spreading fast, too fast. Smoke filled the room. Margaret screamed, a sound that tore through the air like a siren. She reached for me, her fingers inches from my throat, and then Daniel was there. He stepped between us, placing himself in her path. "Let them go," he said. "Let us all go." And then he pushed her backward, into the flames. She shrieked and clawed at him, but he held her there, his hands on her shoulders, his face set with determination. The fire consumed them both, bright and terrible, and I screamed his name. But he did not let go. He stayed until the flames took her, until her screams faded, until the house itself began to burn. Michael dragged me out of the room, down the stairs, out the front door. We ran through the woods as the house collapsed behind us, the roof caving in, the walls crumbling, the flames rising high into the sky. And as we reached the road, I heard voices. Children's voices, laughing and calling and singing. They were free, all of them, including Daniel. The fire department came too late to save the house. By the time they arrived, it was nothing but ash and rubble. The authorities ruled it an accidental fire, caused by faulty wiring in an abandoned building. No one questioned us too closely. No one wanted to dig too deep into the history of that place. But I know what happened. I know my brother gave his life a second time to free the souls trapped in that house. I know he is at peace now. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear his voice. But it is different now. It is not a cry for help. It is a whisper of comfort, a reminder that he is still watching over me. And when I close my eyes, I can see him smiling. Finally free. Finally home. The house on Sherwood Hollow Road is gone, but the memory of what happened there will stay with me forever. If you ever find yourself near an abandoned building, if you ever feel that pull to explore, to test your courage, please listen to this warning. Some places are abandoned for a reason. Some doors should never be opened. And some souls, no matter how much they suffer, cannot be saved by anything but fire and sacrifice. My brother saved me twice. Once when we were children, and once when he gave his life to destroy the evil that held him. I will spend the rest of my life honoring that sacrifice. And I will never, ever go back to those woods again. Vanessa had painted more in 3 days than she had in 3 years. But her hands wouldn't stop bleeding. The apartment on 7th Avenue had been perfect. High ceilings, north-facing windows, exposed brick walls just waiting to be filled with art. And the price was suspiciously low for Manhattan. Previous tenant moved out suddenly, the landlord. Mr. Chen had explained. His voice was flat, rehearsed. Left most of her things. Studio apartment. Perfect for an artist. Vanessa had hesitated. What happened to her? Creative differences. Mr. Chen had smiled without warmth. With the space, some artists, they find the light too inspiring. They work too hard, burn themselves out. It should have been a warning. But Vanessa was desperate. Her gallery showing was in 6 weeks. She had 12 pieces to finish. And her current studio, a shared space in Brooklyn, was too loud, too distracting, too full of other people's energy. She needed isolation, needed focus, needed to create. So, she signed the lease and moved in on a gray October afternoon. The apartment was exactly as promised. Beautiful hardwood floors, windows that flooded the space with natural light, a small bedroom, a kitchen barely large enough to turn around in, and the studio space, 15 feet by 20 feet. White walls, empty easels, paint-stained drop cloths left by the previous tenant. Vanessa set up her supplies immediately. Stretched canvases, oil paints, brushes organized by size, charcoal, pastels, everything she needed. She stood in the center of the room, breathing in the smell of old paint and turpentine, and felt something shift. A presence. Not malevolent, not threatening, just watching, waiting. That first night, Vanessa couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with ideas, compositions, color palettes, techniques she'd never tried before. At 2 a.m., she gave up on rest and went to the studio. She picked up a brush and began to paint. The canvas filled itself. That's how it felt. Not like Vanessa was creating. More like she was channeling, translating something that already existed into physical form. Her hand moved with confidence she'd never possessed. Her color choices were bold, perfect. The composition balanced itself without conscious thought. By sunrise, she'd completed a piece that would have taken her weeks under normal circumstances. It was beautiful. A portrait of a woman's face emerging from shadows, eyes closed, expression serene, almost like she was sleeping, or dead. Vanessa painted for 3 days straight. She barely ate, barely slept. The compulsion to create was overwhelming, all-consuming. Every time she stepped away from the canvas, she felt it. A pull, a whisper at the edge of her consciousness. More, paint more, finish the vision. So, she did. By the third evening, she'd completed 8 pieces. Her gallery showing was practically finished. But something was wrong. Her hands had started bleeding. Small cuts at first. Paper-thin slices across her palms and fingers. She didn't remember cutting herself. Didn't feel pain. But when she looked down, her hands were covered in blood. Fresh blood, dripping onto the canvas, mixing with the paint, creating colors she'd never seen before. That night, she saw it for the first time. The shadow. It stood in the corner of the studio. Not quite solid, not quite transparent. A figure, human-shaped, but wrong. Too tall, too thin. Limbs that bent at angles that shouldn't exist. And it was watching her. Vanessa's breath caught. "Who are you?" The shadow didn't answer. Didn't move. It just watched. And Vanessa felt something in her chest tighten. A coldness spreading through her ribs. A weight pressing down on her lungs. Depression. She recognized it immediately. The same feeling she'd battled for years. The emptiness. The exhaustion. The sense that nothing mattered. But now, it had a shape. Now, it was real. She tried to leave the apartment the next morning. Grabbed her coat. Her keys. Headed for the door. But when she reached for the handle, she stopped. The pull was too strong. The need to paint too overwhelming. The shadow was waiting. In the studio. Calling to her. And despite every instinct screaming at her to run, Vanessa turned around. Walked back to the easel. Picked up her brush. The paintings changed after that. They became darker. More visceral. More honest. Vanessa painted her depression. Her loneliness. Her fear of failure. Her constant sense of inadequacy. Every brushstroke was confession. Every color was emotion made visible. And the shadow grew stronger. It moved closer. No longer in the corner. Now standing directly behind her. Close enough that Vanessa could feel its presence like cold breath on her neck. "You're using me," she whispered one night. "You're feeding on this, on my pain." The shadow didn't deny it. Because it didn't need to. Vanessa already understood. She found the previous tenant's journal. Hidden in the back of the bedroom closet. Leather-bound. Pages filled with frantic handwriting. The entries were dated. Going back 2 years. Vanessa read them with shaking hands. Day 12. "I've never been this productive. The ideas flow like water, like breathing. I'm creating the best work of my life." Day 30. "My hands hurt. Constant pain. But I can't stop. The muse won't let me stop." Day 60. "I saw it today. The shadow. It's been here all along, watching, waiting, growing, growing. Day 90. I understand now. This apartment, it's a bargain, a transaction. It gives you vision, inspiration, productivity, but it takes something in return. It takes your life force, your energy, your will to exist. Day 107. I tried to leave. My body won't let me. The Muse has me. I belong to it now, to the work. I'll finish this series, and then I'll be free, one way or another. The final entry was dated 3 months ago. I'm so tired. The paintings are finished, 20 pieces. My best work, but I don't feel proud. I don't feel anything. The Muse has taken everything. I have nothing left. Tomorrow I'll hang the final piece, and then I'll hang myself. It's the only way to end the transaction. The only way to stop feeding it. Vanessa dropped the journal. Her hands were shaking, bleeding. The cuts had deepened, spread up her wrists. She looked at her own paintings. 8 pieces, nearly identical to the descriptions in the journal. Dark, beautiful, devastating, the best work she'd ever created. But at what cost? She confronted the shadow that night. I won't do it. I won't finish. I won't let you take me. The shadow tilted its head, considering, and then it spoke, not with a voice, but directly into Vanessa's mind. You already have. Vanessa felt something break inside her. A final barrier crumbling. Every artist makes a bargain. Some with galleries, some with critics, some with themselves. But you made a bargain with me. With your depression, with your need to create. I am your muse. Your vision made real. And you cannot separate the art from the artist. You cannot separate yourself from me. I'll stop painting. I'll leave. You won't. The shadow moved closer. Because you need this. You need to create. It's the only thing that makes you feel alive. And I need you to create. Because every painting, every piece you finish, feeds me, gives me form, gives me strength. We are bound now, artist and muse, until the work is complete. Vanessa tried to resist. For 3 days, she didn't touch the brushes, didn't look at the canvases, but the need was overwhelming, constant, unbearable. She dreamed of paintings, woke up with visions burning behind her eyes, felt her hands aching to hold a brush. The shadow watched, patient, knowing, and on the 4th day, Vanessa broke. She returned to the studio, picked up her palette, mixed her colors, and painted. The final pieces came quickly. 12 paintings, exactly what she needed for the gallery showing. Each one darker than the last. Each one more honest, more raw, more devastating. Vanessa painted her childhood trauma, her fear of abandonment, her constant exhaustion, her sense that no matter what she created, it would never be enough. She painted herself, over and over, in different forms, different shadows, different stages of decay, and with each painting, she felt herself fading. Her body grew thin, weak. Her hands bled constantly now, the cuts deep enough to see bone. But she couldn't stop. The muse wouldn't let her. The gallery showing was a success. Critics called it transformative, brutally honest, the work of a true visionary. Vanessa stood in the gallery, surrounded by her paintings, and felt nothing. The shadow stood beside her, invisible to everyone else. But Vanessa could see it clearly now. It had grown, fed on her pain, her life force, her artistic vision. It was almost solid now, almost real. And Vanessa was almost gone. She died 3 weeks after the showing. The official report said natural causes, heart failure, exhaustion. But the landlord knew better. Mr. Chen had seen this before. Many times. Artists who moved into 7C, artists who created their best work. Artists who died soon after. The apartment was a cycle. Transaction. A bargain between creativity and consumption. The Muse needed artists. Needed their depression. Their pain. Their desperate need to create. And in return, it gave them vision. Inspiration. The ability to create masterpieces. But masterpieces required sacrifice. And the Muse was always hungry. Mr. Chen cleaned out the apartment. Removed Vanessa's personal effects. Left the studio supplies. Left the easels. The paintings were sold. Scattered to collectors. Museums. Private galleries. Vanessa's name became known. Celebrated. Her work called groundbreaking. But no one asked about the artist herself. No one wondered about the cost. Because art, true art, always requires sacrifice. And some artists pay with their lives. 6 weeks later, a new tenant arrived. A young man named Marcus, sculptor, looking for studio space, desperate for inspiration. Mr. Chen showed him the apartment. Same speech, same flat delivery. Previous tenant moved out suddenly, left most of her things, perfect for an artist. Marcus didn't ask questions, didn't sense the danger. He just saw the space, the light, the potential. He signed the lease immediately, and moved in the next day. That first night, Marcus couldn't sleep. His mind raced with ideas, forms, materials, techniques he'd never tried before. At 2 a.m., he gave up on rest and went to the studio. He picked up his tools and began to sculpt. And in the corner of the room, the shadow watched, patient, hungry, waiting for the next bargain, the next transaction, the next artist willing to trade their life for their art. Some muses inspire, some muses consume, and the cruelest truth of all is that artists can't tell the difference until it's far too late. Creation requires sacrifice. That's what they teach you in art school. But they never tell you what you're sacrificing to, or that some inspirations, some visions, some masterpieces come with a price written in blood. And the muse always collects.